Hey everybody, today I've got for you the first meta report of 2025. I'm your host Deathy, and let's get right into it because there's a lot to cover this week. So if you guys haven't seen my previous videos, they've obviously added 4 new heroes recently: Calico, Viper, Holliday, and Magnificent Sinclair. A lot of which have had very significant impacts on the overall meta, not only in competitive play, but also in pubs. And so today we'll go over a couple of these, as well as builds that you can try on different heroes. Starting off with the Magnificent Sinclair. As far as builds go, I've seen a couple different ways to build this character. Some people have tried to build around the assistant and basically just stacking fire rate, right? And so if you have higher fire rate, your assistant fires quicker. So the idea with it is pretty much just to get your assistant to fire as fast as possible. And, you know, it does a lot of damage, right? So it's not a terrible idea. Other ideas have been to build around your Hex in a more supportive playstyle, right? So you might go Hex, and you might go an item like Echo Shard, and then you might be able to, you know, just Hex the target basically again. And other than that, the way that I've been building him is more as a spirit nuker. So I just stack a bunch of spirit items, and I essentially just play for my nukes with my assistant, right, which does a ton of damage with your vexing bolt. Now a lot of the abilities right now kind of like are a little bit wonky, so as you can see, like the auto aim on the assistant's a little weird, where sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It has some sort of like auto aim correction, and sometimes it doesn't. The vexing bolt usually works, but sometimes it doesn't. A small tip would be that you can throw it out in the air, and then after you can target it if you want like a more reliable hitting of it. But regardless, I personally think that right now this Spirit Magician build that I have is probably one of the better ways to play him. As far as the skill order goes and everything, you know, there's a couple ways to go about it. So I'm not going to say this is the only build that you can go. There's definitely other ones. You can build in more support. Myself, I'm working on a more supporty, magician with Divine Barrier, Healing Nova, and like extended duration for the Hex. But I think that right now, given the current numbers of damage that he does, this build makes the most sense. And essentially, you're playing this guy as like a solo pick-off character, as well as pretty decent at bursting someone down in team fights, and extremely strong at pushing buildings. So if you want to split push with this character, it's really, really strong. I think that Magnificent Sinclair has probably the highest skill cap in the game at the moment, other than maybe Pocket, some people would argue, but a lot of his abilities are very unforgiving to use, and his ultimate is very difficult to use well, which means that I think this character is only going to go kind of up in value as time goes and people get better at him. But I would highly encourage you guys to try him. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I personally love him. All right, let's talk about Holliday a little bit. So Holliday seems to be possibly one of the most broken characters in the game right now. I know that there's some varying opinions on this. I talked to some people in EU competitive scene, and then, you know, they said that they think Holliday's, you know, very strong, obviously, but maybe not as broken as we think she is in North America. In NA, I'd say the consensus of this hero is pretty broken at the moment, especially the barrels. So Spirit Holliday has been mostly the way that she's been played. The gun Holliday doesn't seem to be great, especially on top of that because we received a global gun nerf recently in the latest hotfix of 10%, which makes it so Spirit builds are a little bit better than they used to be. Not saying that gun builds are dead, they're definitely not, but something to take into account. So how the Spirit build looks, pretty much, let me disable no cooldown so you guys can see, is essentially it plays around the fact that, you know, you're going to get rapid recharge eventually, and then you're just gonna juggle people with barrels, and it's just it's pretty silly, right? You can just pretty much juggle someone permanently. So as you can see, I ran out of charges there, but let's say that I have infinite charges and then no cooldowns on, right? You can pretty much just like throw the person up, and when you do this, they're like movement locked, right? So another thing that you can do as well is you can lasso them, and then you can stack a bunch of barrels in a corner. So I'm not a Holliday player, so it may look a little weird when I do it, right? But let me see, I lasso this person, and then I just like stack a bunch of barrels, and then I could detonate them. Obviously I don't have the duration here on my lasso, and I don't have like extended duration or anything. So let's say I grab duration extender, lasso the person, throw a bunch of barrels in a corner, and then I pretty much just like detonate all of them. I'm doing it very poorly, like you're supposed to go in a corner that's more like this, etc. But there's a lot of silly stuff that you can do on top of having like an AoE stun once your bounce pad is maxed as well. And so overall, this hero just seems to have a ton of utility. Another tip for this hero that I would have at the moment is that Warp Stone makes it so your stun from your bounce pad goes off faster, right? So let's say that you are taking your bounce pad and you want to stun someone, well, you can Warp Stone into the ground and it does apply the stun. I'm not sure why it's not doing it right now, probably because I just took it, but it does actually work. Here's a showcase of it working. But yeah, this hero seems incredibly strong. As far as the build I'd recommend, I've got Spirit Holliday stolen from Goober 70, which is kind of funny because Goober is my teammate. So I'm recommending a build that's not even by him technically, because he hasn't actually made a build yet. But this build is pretty much what he does. I would say that the one thing you could consider is, instead of Surge of Power, you can just go Improved Spirit. Surge of Power is kind of nice for the movement speed, so it really depends what you value. And as always, when I recommend builds, feel free to try to experiment with different things. You don't have to necessarily follow everything in the build step by step. But yeah, this is pretty much like a rough outline of how Holliday is played at the highest level currently. Next, we have Viper, everybody's least favorite slithering creature. So when Viper got added, the DPS was kind of insane. I think the DPS was like 150 DPS level 1. To give you an idea, previously the highest DPS in the game was something like 80 or 85 or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was like around 80. And Viper was like almost double that, and so the character was pretty clearly problematic as far as the just straight up gun damage goes, and it got pretty heavily nerfed. Now the base DPS is only 108, which is still the highest in the game, but you have to understand that the gun is really inaccurate. It has terrible recoil and whatever, so you really need to be like quite close to someone to do like significant damage to them. And so this character, in my opinion, is like pretty good, but is mostly going to be like a pub stomper. So I think for the majority of you guys, this character is going to be like somewhat oppressive at least. But this character does fall like very flat very quickly in the face of CC. Like if you're getting Lash ulted, Dynamo ulted, like Wraith ulted, I mean, there's so many things in the game that can just screw you. Any knock-up screws you really bad too. So like Lash is a really good character against this in general, because you've got a knock-up as well as your ultimate, which are both really good. Holliday is really good against this character for the CC, etc. As far as the builds goes, I would recommend the POSHYPOP Viper build. So for those of you that don't know, POSHYPOP is a competitive player in North America playing for the team Melee Creeps, and he's built up a little bit of a reputation for literally being Viper in real life, and therefore there would be no better source of knowledge to Viper than him. And yeah, the build is pretty standard. I mean, realistically, there's a lot of different versions. He's one of the few people that has Tesla bullets in the build, so it's up to you whether or not you actually like do end up building it. But this build overall is pretty good, and he's one of the people that I've seen have like the better performances on Viper, so I would definitely recommend that you guys check this build out. Last but not least, we have everyone's favorite cat lady, Calico. So this character, when I got at it, a lot of people were like, oh, this character is very underwhelming, probably the only character that's like not very good of the new characters. And at first I kind of agreed. I thought she was still like pretty good, but I didn't think she was OP or anything. And then they pretty much instantly buffed her. It seemed the consensus was that she was not very good. And now ever since the buffs, I think she's like possibly one of the most broken characters. She's extremely strong. I know that I keep saying broken characters a lot, and some people that might find that annoying or whatever. I guess if every character is broken, then no character is broken. Let's just say that she's extremely strong. Her kit is very useful, and she does a lot of damage. As far as the build goes, I'd recommend you guys follow the Mobalytics Bruiser Calico by Hydration. I know that there's a lot of builds going on, and there's like Spirit Calico. Personally, I think Spirit Calico is a little bit troll. Bruiser Calico seems to be a lot better. And I've also seen the Play With Me build. I think this build is also quite good. So depending on your preferences, you can choose. I know Metro also has a build here. I don't love the build as much, but they're all pretty much like very similar, right? I don't think that there's been a ton of innovation on this character yet. I think the Bruiser one is like the most consistent. You just get a ton of sustain with all of your different items. You're very tanky and you deal a decent amount of damage. This character's entire kit is pretty much just like Leaping Slash as well as the ultimate. The cat's very nice to like move around and rotate quickly, but it's not like a huge deal, but it does definitely help her out. And the bombs are good, but like mostly in the laning stage, like throughout the game they're okay, but they can be a little bit hard to hit. As you can see, like the spread is, not very good. And so that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I'd recommend you guys check out the Mobalytics Bruiser Calico by Hydration. As always, all the builds are going to be in the description below. So, as always, it would not be a meta report without some sort of tier list of what's strong, what's not strong. I will say that it is getting harder and harder to do these tier lists, simply because as more characters get added to the game, it's becoming less and less clear who's extremely strong, who needs nerfs, who needs buffs, etc. And I think that the like S tier versus B tier versus C tier it doesn't really sit well with me. So the categories that I have right now are need nerfs, extremely strong, viable, and weak / need buffs. So Just to be clear, if I put a character in need nerfs, in my opinion, it's because they are too strong and they should be nerfed, or at least part of their kit should be nerfed. They might not need to be nerfed like super dramatically, but I think that they're still too strong relative to the other characters. I'm going to be doing this tier list from a mix of a perspective of a competitive player as well as just like regular matchmaking. So not just tournament play, but I am going to explain a little bit why certain characters are more valued in tournament play versus, regular matchmaking. And I'm going to try to do it all, as quickly as possible so that you guys can enjoy the content without having too much fluff. Let's get into it. Starting off with Abrams, I think that Abrams is either strong or viable. I could see the argument for either. His kit is pretty much always useful. You've got a charge, which is a stun, and you've got his ultimate, which is also another stun. The rest of his abilities are pretty meh. Siphon Life is not really that great, and his 3 just makes him a little bit tankier, so it's not a bad ability, but it's also, it's not really that good. He's a good frontliner, he's good at mid-boss, but I don't think he's super high prio right now, especially with the addition of Calico. So with that said, I actually probably would put him in viable. I don't think he's necessarily strong in comparison to the other heroes. He's been very highly valued in the past because of his kit. But yeah, I think right now he's probably viable or strong. In competitive play, I would say that he's more strong. In regular matchmaking, he's probably just like viable. Yeah, he's still a good character, still has a really good strong kit, but I wouldn't value him super highly right now. As far as Bebop goes, I would say Bebop is either strong or extremely strong. It's one or the other. I'm going to put him in extremely strong. As you can see, this is all extremely subjective, right? So there's no clear definitive value. I personally used to sleep on Bebop a lot and thought that he was not very good because the hook is not guaranteed compared to like Paradox, let's say, right? And while that is still true, I do believe that Bebop just offers a lot to the team, and if he does land a hook, it is kind of a guaranteed kill. And on top of that, he's got like a really scary laning stage. He's really good at rotating. Like there's just a decent amount of reasons why I think Bebop is pretty strong at the moment. And the itemization also, like the fact that Gun's got a little bit nerfed, doesn't really bother him too much because he does have a decent amount of like damage of both Spirit and Gun, and he's got a ton of multipliers in his kit that make it so even if he has a few gun items, hooking someone and uppercutting them makes it so they die instantly, even though it was just recently nerfed. We've got Calico, one of the new heroes. If it wasn't obvious, she needs nerfs in my opinion. The sustain in lane is like way too strong. She's like the strongest solo laner right now in my opinion. I think her sustain should only work 50% against troopers, right? So when you use her 2, you shouldn't be able to heal 100% of the value against troopers. You should be able to only heal 50%. It shouldn't, like, kind of like how Warden ult only heals you a certain percentage against troopers versus heroes. I think it should work the same for Calico. And just like, she just does a little bit too much damage and has a little bit too much sustain. If she's nerfed a little bit, I think that she would be fine. She doesn't need like huge nerfs. A lot of her kit gets canceled by slowing Hex, so that's that. I'm going to put Dynamo in viable. I don't think he's extremely strong right now. I don't think he's even necessarily strong. His ultimate has a lot of counters in the game at the moment, and I think that he can be viable into certain compositions. It could also just be a skill issue, but right now I don't feel like the Dynamo is that great. I'm putting Grey Talon into strong. Grey Talon has a ton of damage output, and if Grey Talon has a great game, then he can take over the entire server, but there is a lot of conditions for him to have a great game. You're fairly squishy hero, you're very easy to go on, etc. So for that reason, I think he's strong. Haze, I'm going to put it in weak/need buffs. I don't think Haze is that weak, but honestly, nobody's really picking Haze in the competitive scene, and I don't really see Haze players doing that well in just regular play. So I'm gonna say she needs maybe slight buffs. I don't think it's anything crazy. One thing that was mentioned to me by Chrome recently is that the overall gun buffs don't actually hurt Haze that much because most of her damage is fixation, and fixation was not nerfed. Therefore, she might be a little bit stronger than she was before the patch, actually, in comparison to other heroes. But I think she might still need a little bit of a buff, but I really don't think it'll take much for her to go from weak to strong or extremely strong. Maybe just some slight adjustments to some of her numbers, or a rework to her ultimate. I think her ultimate right now is a little bit boring and I don't love it, but we'll see what they do. Holliday needs nerfs, pretty clear to me. Barrels do too much damage. You can get infinitely juggled by the barrels. Of course, there's some counterplay with like Warp Zone and other, movement abilities you may have, but regardless, getting infinitely juggled definitely doesn't feel fun. She has an AoE stun. Like, her kit is just extremely bloated. All of her abilities are good. I think she definitely needs nerfs, at the very least to her barrels. The other abilities I can live with, but her barrels being juggled feels pretty bad. I'm putting Infernus as strong. I think Infernus has one of the strongest solo lanes right now. Maybe losing to Calico and a few select matchups, but I think he wins against most matchups. He's pretty strong in the mid game. He has good tempo, good utility. Like, I think this character just has a good kit, and he seems to be in a good place right now. I'm putting Ivy in strong. Kind of same thing as Infernus. So Ivy's kind of weakest point in the laning stage. But even then, you have Kutsu Bomb, which allows you to clear the wave quickly. And I think, you know, your ultimate's really valuable. You can build her gun if you want, and she does a decent amount of damage. You can build her utility. She has like some of the best build diversity, in my opinion. You can build her a lot of ways and be useful. I'm going to put Kelvin in extremely strong, especially since the new laning change. So now he has, by the laning change, I mean he just has an extra base 50 HP, and then they buffed his spirit resist in the past. So Kelvin is just kind of like Thanos in lane right now, in my opinion. He's very, very strong, and he has a lot of tempo. His ultimate is an insane tool for like isolating fights, etc. So I think that this hero is extremely strong. I'm going to put Lady Geist in strong. I don't think she's weak, but I don't think she's extremely strong. Her kit is still quite good. She still has the same issues that she's always had, like low mobility is kind of her biggest problem. But other than that, her ultimate is still very viable. Damage amplification on Malice is very strong. Her bomb is great at clearing waves and clearing camps, so she has a lot of value in a game for sure. I'm going to put Lash at strong. So I think that there's potential to put Lash at extremely strong as well. I could see the argument. So I'd put him like maybe at the top of strong. He still does a ton of damage. He has a lot of utility with his ultimate. He's really good at ganking. He's really good at tempo, which seems to be kind of the name of the game right now, like closing out games, like being aggressive, etc., which Lash is really good at. The gun nerfs kind of don't really matter to him because he has both a spirit and a gun build available, and you can itemize to whichever one fits your needs better. So if gun is worse, he'll just go spirit and vice versa. So he's not really too bothered by that. And I think he's still like really strong. I'm going to put McGinnis in strong as well. I think McGinnis just does a ton of damage, really aggressive laner. The wall is always going to be a good ability. Pretty much McGinnis's worst ability is her turrets, which is fine by me. I personally hate the turrets. I know some people really like him, and that's okay. I just don't like turrets in my video games. But yeah, her turrets kind of suck, but everything else is pretty good about her. She does a lot of gun damage. Her heal's really good. Her ultimate's really good. Her wall's really good. So overall, I'm putting her at strong. Mirage, I would say extremely strong in organized play. In non-organized play, just regular matchmaking, I'd probably put him at strong instead. But I'm going to go at it from an organized play perspective. He still has pretty much the only global ult in the game. He fulfills a role that not a lot of other heroes fulfill. And for that reason, I think he's extremely strong and extremely valuable for a team. I'm going to put Moen Krill at strong, probably like towards the top of strong. I think Moen Krill has a lot of value as a capped character that offers a, you know, lockdown that is very reliable and also lasts a very long time, right? So the grab for his ultimate is one of the most reliable pieces of lockdown in the game outside of like maybe Dynamo Black Hole, but that's like a lot less quick and a lot more telegraphed. So I think Moen Krill is really good for making plays happen around the map with his teammates, especially in organized play. I think he's strong. You could even make the argument for extremely strong. Paradox, I'm going to put in need nerfs. I don't think Paradox needs huge nerfs anymore, but I think her kit is still just like kind of insane. I would really love to see nerfs to her wall, or like a way to change her wall to like make her feel a little bit more balanced. I think for regular matchmaking, I don't think she needs nerfs, but I think for organized play, she kind of does, which puts her in a hard spot to balance. But I don't think she's as egregious as she used to be, thanks to the new addition of Holliday, which Holliday is another pick character that can kind of replace Paradox, but also not really. And also other characters like Calico deals with Paradox decently well, for example, using her ultimate to dodge the swap. I'm going to put Pocket in strong. I think he's still very playable, very strong. His, like, against the right team composition, Pocket can be insane. If they don't have a lot of ways to silence you or, you know, hold you down, if they don't have like a Moen Krill, for example, you can kind of like roam free and just do insane damage and have insane survivability in the fights. I'm going to put 7 as I hesitating between viable and weak/need buffs. I think he probably does need buffs, so I'll put him at weak/need buffs. But I think you have to be very careful because once again, a small buff is probably enough to take 7 from weak to strong or even extremely strong. His kit is not that bad. It's just right now he doesn't really do any much better than other characters, right? Like he can be played as a support, he can be played as a carry. He has a lot of different playstyles, but I just don't really see it. Shiv, I'm going to put in need nerfs. I think bloodletting is insane. He has damage amp on his ult. I mean, there's so many things about this character that are just insane. He did get nerfed. I think he probably still does need nerfs because he's still like server admin a little bit, even with the addition of new characters. I don't think he's as broken as, for example, Holliday or Calico are, but I think he does need nerfs. Magnificent Sinclair, I'm going to say needs nerfs. I think he's still too strong. Even though he's a very hard character to play, I think it's only going to become more clear as time goes on that he's a character that needs nerfs. Kind of like how Pocket got nerfed for like whatever 6 months in a row. Pocket's a high skill ceiling character, and so is Sinclair, which makes me think that if we think he needs nerfs right now, when people like even myself, I only have like 20 games on him, it's very clear to me that he will need nerfs. I'm going to put Vindicta at need nerfs. She's gotten a lot of nerfs, but like, I don't know, this character just has way too much tempo early on, in my opinion. The moment she hits 3k, she can just like kill you from half health very quickly, and it just seems like this character still rules the server a lot of the time. And if she snowballs, then all of a sudden she's just like ultra rich and she's just killing everyone really quickly. Her damage scales really well, and even though she was a little bit hit by the gun nerfs, she still does a lot of spirit damage thanks to her flight and her bird. Her bird is also basically a crippling headshot once it's maxed, so it's just incredibly strong. Viscous, I'm going to put it extremely strong. I don't think he needs nerf, but I think he has one of the most useful kits in the game. All of his abilities are great. His punch offers displacement. His cube is the best save in the game. His 1 is really, really strong nuke, and his ultimate is great for stun and like great for mid-boss fights, great for, you know, enclosed areas. I'm going to go ahead and put Viper and Viable. I think that if you're in regular matchmaking, she could be extremely strong. With what I've seen of her in organized play and tournament play, I would put her as viable, like as in if you want a character that slides around and does a ton of damage, Viper does that, but I think that she gets countered very easily by things like metal skin and by things like just, you know, having crowd control. I don't think she has a ton of different builds, so we'll see how it develops, but right now my gut feeling is that Viper is not going to be that much of an issue after the nerfs. I'll put Warden as extremely strong. I think his kit is still insane. Ult Warden is still incredibly viable. Gun Warden's been nerfed like a lot, but I think it's still like really strong. So it depends what your team needs. You can build both Gun Warden or Ult Warden depending on your needs. I'm going to put Wraith at the top of extremely strong. I think you could definitely make the argument for putting Wraith in needs nerfs. I mean, this character does kind of everything. Farms really well, has good mobility with the TP, does a ton of damage, has a disable that silences people and disarms them. Character kind of has a little bit of everything, but I'm not sure if she needs nerfs or if we just need more characters that are really strong. And last but not least, Yamato, which I will put at extremely strong. This character still has an ultimate that gives you unstoppable as well as bullet resist and spirit resist, which is just very strong. Of course, you don't have anti-heal resist anymore, which means you don't just get to heal to full health every time you press the button 3, but you're still kind of really strong when you're in your ultimate. You have really good laning, you have good power spikes, and so I think that this character is in a very strong position. That's it for me, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.